Punishment? My dad only whipped me a couple of times. He hit me with a belt, strapped me with a belt a couple of times. And I remember one of the times specific, never forget it, never did it again. But my mother normally switched us. We had that peach tree I told you about where we hoisted up the rope and dropped a big piece of wood on the guy's house.
Yeah.
Well, a peach tree would get little saplings growing out of the trunk, little She'd cut those saplings on and switch us on her legs. Pow, pow, pow.
I know how that feels.
When we didn't mind. We had to mind.
Yes, I do. You always deny it. You have selective memory, Mom.
And my dad, I remember why, we had a neighbor, AAA, and I think Clara was her name. She was going with a guy who had a son or something. Anyhow, she lived about 2 doors from us at one time. And this boy was there. He and I got into some sort of an argument. My dad happened to be not too far away. I told him, "Oh, why did you go chew on your banana?" You know what I was talking about. Oh man, he didn't like that.
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about.
Chew on your penis.
Pecker?
Yeah, you pecker. Go chew on your banana. I guess I was 10 or 15.
Your dad came and gave
my
you a
dad
whipping.
took me in, and man, he whipped me with a belt.
For
Whipped
using
me
that
hard.
kind of language?
Huh? For using that kind of language, yeah. I never talked like that up to that.
Was that a common saying back then? Chew on your banana?
No, nobody. I'd never heard that before. I just made that up at the time.
It's funny.
I was really mad at him for some. I forget why. I was mad, but I was. Anyhow, that was a whipping I got. And my mother didn't whip us often, but if she thought it was necessary, by golly, she would whip us. And teachers could whip you too,
Yeah.
They had permission. If they didn't like what you were doing, they'd keep you after school. They'd put dunce things on your head, make you face the wall, and act. They'd make a fool out of you, and it was so embarrassing that people never liked to get in trouble with a teacher. Teachers had authority then.
Yeah.
You didn't dare do anything that the teacher told you not to.
And lawyers have changed all that.
Huh?
Lawyers have changed all that.
Oh yeah. Parents have changed it.
No.
Sure. But anyhow, and that's a kind of a punishment that my dad had handed out a couple of times, and my mother used to switch us. My dad, he took us hunting too, when we were young. And we'd go jackrabbit hunting jackrabbits with my dad and his friends. And we didn't carry any guns. We'd just go with them, walk with them, looking for jackrabbits. And boy, those jackrabbits were big, and they could run like heck. And they'd shoot them, and then they would skin them, and what they're looking. But sometimes they had worms in the meat. Then we couldn't eat those jackrabbits. If you got the cottontails now, they were not as big as smaller rabbits, when they had little furry tails, little white tails, they called them cottontails. They very seldom had their worms. We used to shoot, during the hunting season, they go 3 or 4 times maybe. I remember the first rattlesnake I ever heard. There was a lot of rattle. We would go to Joshua Forest up in Mojave Desert.
Joshua Tree?
Yeah, there were Joshua trees, and it was in the Mojave Desert, north of Los Angeles.
Yeah, okay.
And man, I was walking by some bushes, and I heard a rattlesnake. The first one you hear, you don't have to ask anybody, what's that?
I'll bet you don't.
You don't. When you hear a there's rattlesnake around. You've never heard one. When you hear one, you know what it is.
Yeah, and back in your day, it's not like you'd seen it on TV or heard it on the radio. You'd never heard one at all.
I'd never heard one. My dad came and he shot it, and
Did it scare you?
Pretty easy to shoot because they look right down the barrel of the gun,
Yeah.
And with the shotgun,
you can hardly miss.
yeah, he built, and then he cut the rattles off. We took the rattles from.
Did you eat it?
I think he had 7 rattles in a button, or 8 rattles, or 9 rattles in a button. Wasn't a real bee. It was about that long, I guess, about 4 foot long.
Did you skin him and eat him?
No, we didn't skin him and eat him. I ate one though later when I was going to before I went to Central America on a trip with some guys. I'll tell you that story later. Yeah, that's funny. We were in a camp, or campground. A lot of people camping, and we killed this rattler on our trip. Actually, I think we ran over it and killed it, and we brought it, and we're being big shots, and we skinned it, and we're talking about the rattler and how good it is. We'd never eaten a rattler in our life, and skinned it. And then some guy there, he said, "You sure it didn't bite itself." He said, "If it bit itself, would it kill you? The poison get in its skin and you're eating the meat, would that kill you?" Oh man, he scared the heck out of us. But we had to eat it, we were supposed to eat it. But we didn't sleep so good that night. We were always, my stomach, I think my stomach's hurting me. That's what you forget for being a wise ass sometimes. And my dad was really good about that. He'd take us, we'd go dove hunting. And went up to Tule Lake. We had some relatives that lived out of Corcoran, California. Well, it was my grandmother's father's brother lived up there. No, my grandmother's husband's brother lived there. His name was Abe. We called him Uncle Abe. Now, he was really my mother's uncle, but we called him Uncle Abe. And he lived up there, and he was a farmer up there, trying to make a go at farming. And we'd visit him occasionally. And one time we were up there, again, we were kids, I forget how old, and they had a cricket infestation, like a plague of locusts, and the crickets were on the street in a small town, And I mean, they were in the restaurants. They were piled up along the sides of the building, thousands and thousands. You couldn't walk on the street without walking through crickets, and little crickets about that long, about an inch and a half or two. And boy, they were just over the road. You'd go on the road and just the tires were crushing them all. And that's the first time I'd ever seen like a locust invasion or a cricket invasion. This were crickets, not. And then they had
Is the light on?
The light is still on.
Okay.
They had a carnival up there that we went to one time. Well, we'd go and stay with Uncle Abe, and they had a carnival, and that was about a half a mile or a mile away, down a country road, there were no houses. He lived a little away from the end of town, and this was nearer town. And so we went down there, and they had a Lupo plane, and we went in that Lupo plane. That's sort of scary too.
A Lupo plane?
Yeah, well, they had a big arm. At the end, they had like a torpedo almost, with two people facing this way and two people facing the other way. They'd strap 4 people in, and then this arm would start swinging like a pendulum, go up higher and higher, and pretty soon it would go around the top and go around several times that way, and then it'd come back, go around the other way, screaming and hollering. I got dizzy and sick. I threw up, got dizzy and everything.
Not during the ride, I hope.
Huh?
Not during the ride.
No, just as soon as I got off. I got sick as a dog. I got sick when I was an adult too, at Disney World. I think it was Disney World.
Really?
One of those saucers?
Yeah.
Where you go in a saucer?
Yeah, the cups.
It's a cup, spins around,
Spin it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the worst
I
ride.
had a little vertigo, and I got sick when I got off of that thing. I was staggering and almost throwing up. I managed not to throw up, but I almost did. Now doing aerobatics, I never did.
I think I maybe remember that, Dad.
Huh? You were probably with me. It probably took you and Robin.
I either remember that or I remember another time going and you wouldn't go on that ride.
Yeah, I would never go on it after that.
I may remember both of those instances.
Because it would make me sick, that spinning really got to my head. And but anyhow, we went up to Uncle Ed, and there was Tule Lake, which was a lot of salt up there. Not salt, what do they call it? Oh, it's a like salt pan almost, but they didn't call it that. And it kills vegetation and stuff. It's terrible. Anyhow, there's a lot of rabbits and dove. A place where the dove would come in. There were a lot of. It was a swampy, marshy area, not good for growing stuff really. They grew some cotton up there. Terrible place for a farm. Uncle Abe, he never made much money. I'll tell you another interesting story. My mother told me this story about Uncle Abe and her father. Now this was before I was born. But she said one morning her father got up. Now they lived in Arizona, dairy farm, outside of town, you know. And got up and started packing his bag. And his wife, my mother's mother, asked him what he was doing. He said, my brother died last night. I've got to go to town and get a train and go to California to Corcoran where Abe lived because I know he died. And they hadn't received the telegram that he hadn't been sick. You know, it wasn't expected to die or anything. But my brother woke up and he knew his brother had died. And he got everything together. And I guess then they got either a telegram came or maybe they had a phone. I didn't think they had a phone. I think a telegram came. Something came and said Abe had died and they're going to bury him a certain time. He went to town, got in his buggy and went to town.
He was on his way by the time of that
and
message
got on
arrived?
a train and went to California to his brother's funeral.
But he was already on the way by the time the message arrived?
Yeah, he had already packed his bag and told his wife he had to leave before the message ever arrived. So I believe in telepathy for that reason. My mom told me that the two brothers were very, very close. That they both came from Switzerland. Abe was his older brother. Abe came first. And then he got a job. Then he sent some money back for his brother to come. His brother, my grandfather, he was only 14 years old. By himself, he emigrated to Arizona from Switzerland and met his brother, and they worked, and then he finally homesteaded. He and my grandmother homesteaded some property in Arizona. Boy, too bad they didn't homestead around where they used to go on picnics. This was before I was born, I know. I've got pictures where they used to go on picnics around Saddleback, which is where the Scottsdale is, the real rich part of
real fancy
Phoenix, outside of Phoenix.
Yeah.
There.